In early 1570, Queen Elizabeth's looks were typical of a pregnant woman. On December 1560, according to Me Devon Kunow, a secret dispatch among the Escurial papers said that the Queen was expecting a child by Robert Dudley in early 1561. There were rumors that some private or formal betrothal had passed between the Queen and Robert Dudley. Reports came on that Queen Elizabeth I was bedridden with a mysterious illness that caused her body to swell like that of a pregnant woman. No one has intrigued the modernist more than the Virgin Queen, who perhaps wasn't actually a virgin. Elizabeth's medical records don't indicate that she would have had any issues with fertility. She came to the throne young and healthy. Unlike her sister, Mary, she didn't have any history of difficult, irregular periods. Why did Queen Elizabeth I hide her pregnancy from everyone? Was it because she wanted to protect herself and strengthen her kingdom? Or because she wanted to protect her child? Well, let's find out. Hi. Welcome to History Rediscovered. Remember to support our channel, please subscribe. In this episode we discuss Queen Elizabeth I's pregnancy, secret marriage and childbirth. In November 1558, Elizabeth, the last surviving child of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, became England's sovereign. The nation was on the verge of a religious war between Catholics and Protestants and needed peace and stability. Elizabeth was just 25 years when she ascended the throne. Despite her age, she promised England her devotion. From the start of Elizabeth's reign, it was expected that she would marry, and the question arose to whom. By the time Elizabeth gave her first speech to Parliament in early 1559, she declared that it would be sufficient for her to live and die a virgin, insisting there would be no marriage or children to distract her from duty. In her own words, holding her coronation ring, she declared, "Behold, behold the pledge of this, my wedlock and marriage with my kingdom, and do not upbraid me with miserable lack of children. For every one of you, and as many as are Englishmen, are children and kinsmen to me." She clearly equates marriage with a lack of safety, because Elizabeth's father, Henry VIII, married a total of 6 times, and as the famous mnemonic rhyme goes, they were divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. When she was less than 3 years old, her own mother Anne Boleyn was beheaded on the 19th of May 1536, on the grounds of treason and adultery. She was a little bit older. At 8 years old, she understood the speed and ruthfulness of Queen Anne's downfall. She was fully aware of her stepmother Catherine Howard's execution on the 13th of February 1542. Catherine was not even given a chance to plead in her defense. Of her 4 other stepmothers, 2 were divorced and cast aside. One of them, Jane Seymour, died in childbirth, and the other barely survived due to an implication of suspected heresy, months before her own father's death. Henry VIII married Catherine Parr in July 1543. She was his 6th and final wife. Catherine outlived Henry and went on to marry Thomas Seymour, who we will discuss later in the video. Because of what her father did, Elizabeth's views of matrimony with regards to her own father's marriages can only have been connected to alienation or death, whether by childbirth or beheading. But despite everything, Elizabeth is said to have had a secret private marriage. There were numerous reasons that Elizabeth's virginity was and has been the subject of intense scrutiny. The idea of the Virgin Queen is synonymous with Robert Dudley, but he was just one of the men who may have been her lover. We're going to look at all of them and how likely it is that Elizabeth lost her virginity to them. You have to know that Elizabeth did not have any fertility issues. Unlike many women of the era, Elizabeth also was quite physically active, enjoying riding, hunting, and walking. She wasn't much of a drinker, and she didn't overindulge at the dining table. Thomas Seymour, the brother of Jane Seymour, was the man who had the potential to be Elizabeth's lover. But he was married to Catherine Parr, Henry's widow. The couple took Elizabeth into their household and they lived together for a while. Although almost twice her age and married, Seymour was handsome, roguish, and had at one point been considered a husband for Elizabeth herself. Thomas Seymour engaged in romps and horseplay with the 14-year-old Elizabeth. Seymour continued to visit her in the mornings. It began with him appearing before she was awake to say good morning, but soon he began visiting before the household had even risen. This led to him reaching for Elizabeth while she was in bed. On one of his morning visits, he actually tried to smack her buttocks and kiss her, but he didn't manage to do that. Elizabeth rose early and surrounded herself with maids to avoid his unwelcome morning visits' embraces. Parr, rather than confront her husband over his inappropriate activities, joined in. It was decided that Seymour and Elizabeth weren't ever left alone together. And Elizabeth did try to create the distance. She even added her own note in letter asking Seymour not to touch her anymore. However, after Parr discovered the pair in an embrace, she ended this state of affairs. and in May 1548, Elizabeth was sent away. Her accepted husband by a morganatic marriage, a private one, and that one of the children of that marriage was Lord Robert Dudley, the Earl of Essex, who she had loved from childhood. She was true to Leicester, believing that, whom God hath joined let no man put asunder. She felt that love had joined them and that God was love. Nothing else mattered. That is why she is said to have kept it a secret from the time she ascended the throne. Robert was a man that could turn any woman's head. He was 6 foot tall with a magnificent physique and dark good looks that earned him the nickname of the Gypsy. Prior to Robert's relationship with Elizabeth, the Dudleys were no friends of the Tudors. Henry VIII executed Robert's grandfather for treason, but despite this fact, Robert Dudley was one of Elizabeth's favorites, and his proximity to her as Master of the Horse and Privy Councillor made him influential and envied for his access to the Queen. Although their relationship carried on for decades, Elizabeth consistently refused his proposals because the match was opposed by many, who thought that it was inappropriate for Elizabeth to marry a subject and feared the power and influence that Dudley would obtain as her husband. Throughout his affair with the Queen, Dudley was actually married. At least he was. Until his wife died under mysterious circumstances. At the time, many suspected Dudley had his wife murdered so he could marry Elizabeth instead. It was at this point that Elizabeth realized she could not marry him. Instead, she made Dudley the Earl of Leicester in 1564, and the two remained close until his death in 1588. Something strange happened. In 1561, Elizabeth was mysteriously bedridden with an illness that caused her body to swell. 25 years later, in 1587, a young man calling himself Arthur Dudley was arrested on the coast of Spain under suspicion of being a spy. The man claimed to be the illegitimate son of Elizabeth and Robert Dudley, with his age being consistent with birth during the 1561 illness. He was taken to Madrid for investigation, where he was examined by Francis Englefield, a Catholic aristocrat exiled to Spain and secretary to King Philip II. 3 letters exist today describing the interview, detailing what Arthur proclaimed to be the story of his life, from birth in the royal palace to the time of his arrival in Spain. However, this failed to convince the Spanish because he did not have concrete evidence. Elizabeth's life was so closely observed by contemporaries that she could not have hidden a pregnancy. Moreover, in the Tudor era, queens were attended at all times by their servants. Even when they were answering nature's call, there was always a servant standing there, waiting to wipe the royal undercarriage when they finished. Elizabeth's favored maids shared her bed. They were with her day, and neither Elizabeth I nor Robert Dudley acknowledged anyone as their son. Nor would they. Elizabeth made quite sure that no one could say they would rule England when she was dead. Arthur would have to prove he was the Queen's son. He could not prove it. Some historians point out that there was no evidence that Elizabeth slept with Robert Dudley.